I hope you have never felt the chess fear. Don't be afraid, my friend. KosakChess is here, and we continue our complete guide to easy chess puzzles. This is the second part of this guide. If you didn't see the previous clip, you will find it over there on the top of the film. And also, I will put the link into the description. If you didn't see that video, please go there. I mentioned there a lot of important patterns, a lot of important things you need to do, you need to see before we start solving the puzzles. Now we ended on the puzzle number 20, so we can start considering the same things as we did in the previous clip. The strongest piece, this is of course the queen. The queen can only give one check, which is queen g7, but it looks stupid because of the simple reason king takes g7. So another strongest piece, this is the rook. Rook on a1 and rook on h4. We see the rook on a1 it didn't even move. So considering such moves like this, not definitely on the puzzle number 20. This rook looks to the king. It stays in front of the king. So it may give us some hint that this rook might be really useful in that combination. But let's have a look also at this bishop, who is shooting along this diagonal and also covers the g8 square on which the king can potentially escape. Well, of course it can't because the bishop covers it, but it is worth to mention that this bishop would be really useful. So if we know the bishop is cutting off the g8 square, if we know the rook is looking in front of the king, and we also know the fact that the queen stands really close to this king, in general it is on the king side, we will most probably use these three pieces to make a final attack. Do you see it? The best defenders of the king are the pawns. As I mentioned in the previous clip, the weaker piece we have, the stronger defender we have. In general, pawns are the weakest elements on the chessboards, so that's why they are the strongest defenders. If we get rid of these defenders, we will be probably fine. So rook takes h7 check. We of course consider checks as the main priority. King takes h7, queen h4 check. Let's have a look that this square is occupied by the bishop, this square is occupied by the pawn, and we are also covering these squares by our queen. So we can expect queen h5 and queen h5 checkmate. I hope this is pretty easy to understand. Okay, again, the strongest piece. This is the only piece on the board we have. These are the rooks. So we consider checks. Let's first consider the checks with this piece. Rook e3 and rook a2. They are both blundering the rook, so we can discard this option immediately. This rook can give a check to c2. And now the king has several options. It can go to the three possible squares, but only one makes, let's say, the biggest sense. Because after rook c2, if he plays king f1, something lagged a little bit. After rook c2, if he plays king f1 or king e1, please have a look that the rook right now covers the c1 knight, but if the king goes into the first file, the rook stops covering the knight. So after king f1 or king e1, we just get the knight, then we get the rook, we are perfectly fine. So after rook c2, we need to consider king d1 as the main move. Now the king is attacking the rook and is defending the knight. We are probably not really counting right now so for the checkmate because we don't have enough strong pieces on the board to do that. But we can also make a use of the tactics with the first rank, and this one we will call a it is not a pin, but I will say this is a covert attack, let's say. I don't know the proper name, but it doesn't really matter. We don't care about the names. We care about the chess motifs. After rook c2 and king d1, let's have a look that rook and king are on the one file. So if we give a check along this file, we can get this rook. But how to do it when the knight stands over there? Well, we can get rid of this knight. So if we play rook c2, he has to play king d1 as we mentioned earlier. Rook takes c1, we sacrifice the rook. But for what reason? King c1. Now we see the rook and the king are standing on the one line. So we need to give a check along this line to get the access for the rook. We have only one possible way to do it. This is rook a1 check, and whenever the king moves, we just take the free rook on h1. And if we count the material on the end of variation, we will see that we will be up a rook, he will be up a bishop. So if we are good at maths, 5 points is a little bit more than 3 points. So let's go for it. Rook c2, rook takes c1, rook a1, and we grab a free rook. Congratulations. Wow, 22. Guys, in how many moves we need there to give a checkmate? The strongest piece, we are looking for checks. Queen b7 and queen a8. Okay. The strongest piece is the queen. We have the king in the center, so let's consider checks. Queen e4. Queen e2 is the first check. Blah. Queen b4 is another check. Yeah, queen b4 might be sensible. Rook d2 is the only sensible cover of that check. And after queen b4, rook d2, we may see. Well, maybe before we start calculating, let's have a look at the material. We are rook down. What does it mean? It means that if we play some random, normal, good-looking moves, it will probably not be enough to solve correctly the puzzle. After queen before rook d2, of course, you may say we can maybe develop the last piece. No, maybe not the last piece, but we can develop the rook, which doesn't take part into the game. We can attack the rook twice, so we can make a lot of pressure, and this is true, of course. But white can't easily defend this rook by moving back the queen on a2. And the thing is that this rook is also defended twice, and we don't have enough forces to strengthen the attack. So after queen b4, rook d2, now it may seem that we are lacking some resources. Okay, what is the second strongest piece? Of course, this is the rook. But again, if the rook hasn't made a move, it is most probably not the piece we want to add to the action. Also, the rook can only move to the 3 possible squares. It isn't that much. So, if we considered moves with queen, if we considered move with rook, let's now consider the move of our most active piece. Of course, this is queen, but besides queen, this is for sure the bishop. The bishop can also give a check to c3. Yeah? Knight, of course, can take it because the queen is looking in front of the king. So after bishop c3, rook d2. Now again, we are starting calculating. Of course, maybe we can take the bishop on d2. The rook on d2. But the thing is that in general, you need to know that in tactics, if your piece is standing really active, you may sometimes not really give it up, even though you are getting the material, since this piece can be more useful in the future. And this is the case in this puzzle. If we play bishop c3, rook d2, we don't want to get this material and give up our bishop, but we want to make a use of the bishop as the great attacker and also the pinner of the rook on d2. Because after bishop c3, rook d2, we can again start calculating checks with our strongest piece, and we get an additional check, queen b1, because now the rook isn't standing on d1. And after queen b1, bishop c3, rook d2, queen b1, the only possible way for white is to play knight c1. Okay, grab the knight, king e2, grab the rook, and now you see how much potential has this bishop. We could grab a rook, but we made a use of it. So it's really important. If you have active piece, don't really give it up because of you can get some material. Let's calculate a little bit more ahead, and you will see that you can make even greater potential by your attacking piece. So let's give a check. Okay, the chess commanded it, but we don't care. I will show you what I was calculating. Bishop c3. Let's maybe start it. Bishop c3 check. Okay, let's go for analysis maybe. Sorry for the jumping, but I want to show you the whole variation. He played rook g1, bishop c3, rook d2. We don't want to get this rook since I think we can make a use of the bishop. We can get a check to b1. Knight c1 is the only move. Queen takes c1, king e2, and queen d2. And the bishop is really useful because it protects our queen. And now we are piece up. The king is destroyed. The king stays in the center. Of course, this is not the position he usually belongs to. Let's come back to our next puzzle. I hope you hear me well. The strongest piece is the queen. We can give a lot of checks, but this we lose the queen, this we lose the queen, this we lose the queen, this we lose the queen. So in 3 seconds I just discarded 4 options for giving checks, because everyone tells you consider checks, captures and attacks, blah 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 blah. But do an optimization of your time. You can consider 4 checks in a matter of a second, because it blunders your queen immediately. The only sensible check is queen e5. But black has several options. They can cover from the check by playing queen f6. They can escape to h7 to g8. The position hasn't really changed. And remember, let's count the material. We are material down, and this is a really big amount of material down, because we are a rook and a piece down. Rook and the knight, to be precise. So we need to make a use of our most active piece. Or maybe let's consider also the another strongest piece. This is the rook, but the rook can only make 2 sensible or maybe 2 legal moves, where even one of it ends in a mate for us. So don't consider even the moves of this rook. The bishop can give a check on the black diagonal. And what does it mean to us? If the bishop gives check, let's have a look that this move is no longer possible. Well, of course it is possible, but it's stupid. We just take the queen. The bishop covers it, right? So after bishop b2, the king can escape to h7, and again we start calculating the moves of our strongest piece, and we see that our piece gets 1 additional check. This is a check on f7. Now, after queen f7, bishop can cover with the check, from the check. But now if we look, our 2 pieces are attacking the g7 square. So we give a checkmate. Bishop b2, king h7, and we would give a checkmate. Okay, guys, puzzle number 25, and mate in 1 move. Now, if I told you, or maybe you already realized it, this is quite easy. Okay, but let's do this puzzle as any other we did previously. The strongest piece is the queen, but queen can't even give a check. It has only 4 possible squares to go on, but it can't give a check. So let's maybe stay away with it. Rooks can barely move. They can move along the first file, and they do completely nothing. The most active piece, this is the knight. The knight attacks the pawn on f7, which is close to the king. It is also a hint when the most active piece attacks some squares which are really close to the king. We can make a use of it, and we can make a use of the squares attacked with our most active pieces, and we can also give, let's say, this is kind of an example of a scholar mate. Yeah, bishop takes f7. It is not the exact scholar mate, but it is something looking really similar. So just take the pawn and be happy. Bishop f7 checkmate. Strongest piece. Which checks can it give? Queen b3. Ooh, and again, most active piece, knight on e5. So if we play queen b3, we attack the king. The king can make the only move, which is king f8. Of course, Black can, of course, black can cover with the check, but queen d5, checkmate, GG. So after queen b3, king f8, again the knight on e5 does literally the same thing as it did in the previous task, since it covers the f7 square. So again, we give a checkmate on a f7 square. And this is the pattern recognition, yeah? Let's have a look that a lot of checkmates happens on the f7 square. It is, of course, by the reason, like if you can imagine the starting set of the board. So we have the king there, we have the bishop there, we have the knight there. You can see that the pawn on f7 is only protected by the king. As we know, king is a really bad defender, right? Since it has, say, infinite quality, so it is the most important piece. It is the worst defender we can even imagine, really. So after, because of the fact that the f7 pawn is only protected by the king from the very beginning of the game, this is the weakest point in the position on the beginning of the game. So that's why a lot of tactics happens on f7. Queen b3, queen f7, we are happy. Queen, the most active piece, can't give a check. The rook can give one check. This is rook h5. Okay, we are happy. Queen h3, we can win a queen. Be happy. Not really. Do you remember what I have told you some puzzles ago? You can't always be happy of taking material because of the fact you just take the material. You can make even a better potential of this attacking piece by by not giving it up yet, but to use it as an attacker since it may have a better potential. After rook h5, queen h3, now we get a new possible checks in the position. Now the queen can make a check on e2, since the checks d2 and c2 are blundering the queen. So rook h5, queen h3, and queen e2 check, the only check which doesn't blunder our queen. Now after king h1, the thing is easy, rook h3 checkmate, the king no longer protects the queen, so we are happy. A rook h5, queen h3, queen e2, and rook g2, we can cover from the check. And now again we are looking for checks. Rook takes h3, and queen takes g2. After queen takes g2, the king can, wow, a tone twister, the king can take the g2 queen, and we are material down. Because of course, this is also worth to mention that we are a full rook down there. So we need to be really precise. Rook h5, queen h3, queen e2, rook g2. And again, we are calculating checks. Rook takes h3 check, king takes h3. Yeah, and again, we are starting calculating checks. We have queen there. Queen f3, queen g4, queen g5, and queen g2. Queen g2 blunders the queen, so we discard this option. Queen a3 may have looking good, but the king just comes back to h2. We need to imagine that after this line, all possible squares the king can go for, or maybe the potential squares it can go for, are these squares. So the knight already covers the g3 square, we are fine. The queen already covers the g4 square, so we are fine. So we now need to cover somehow the squares along the h file. So if we put the queen on the h file, it should be over, and we can do it by playing queen h5. These variations are pretty forced because we just give check, 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 and check, and we end it in a mate. But this is how you need to calculate variation. You just give a check, and then you consider another checks. Then you give a check, you check another checks, you check another checks, you check checks by checking checks. You know, this is how the process of calculation works. At least in my case, rook h5 check. I give another check, I give another check, and I give a last check, the checkmate. Ooh, the king stays on a6. The strongest piece. Only one possible check. Is it a checkmate? I think it is. Boom. We are really close to the puzzle number 29. We are close to 30, sorry. Now it is 29. And the solution was mate in 1. So guys, it is really doable. It is really doable. Now we are... Oh, this is a great task because now we are... now we are changing aside a little bit. Now we are going to feel a little bit as a defender of the position. The last move, it was rook takes d7, so the knight disappeared. And now we can't really consider this position as a attacking one since the king is in a check. Let's have a look that this king is really safe. So now we need to think of the position and look on the whole board. How is the material going? After we take the rook, we are exchange up. We can take this rook on 3 ways, but only one way is correct because that's how these puzzles works in general. Well, if we take the rook with the queen, let's have a look maybe what kind of threats can our opponent make. This bishop, I think we can even... Sorry. This bishop somehow got stuck on a7. I have no idea how did he find himself over there, but he did somehow. So this is our problem. Why is this our problem? Because this is standing really close to our king, and it attacks one of the defender of the king. We can also now capture the queen. They are both attacking the b6 square. So imagine that if we take the rook with the queen and we just give this really unpleasant check, we are really close to the mate. Yes, now if we were white, I am absolutely sure that we will be trying to convert this position into some checkmate net. We can't allow our opponent to go for this check. In general, the prophylaxis is the really important factor in chess. You can't allow your opponent to realize his plan if it's dangerous, of course. This check on b6 is really, really dangerous. So we have to somehow not allow him to do it. If we take with the rook, the pawn is defended. If we take with the pawn is attacked, sorry. If we take with the queen, the pawn is attacked. But if we take with the knight, let's have a look that this pawn is defended. And moreover, the bishop should be gone in the very next move, because after knight d7, this bishop is in kinda trap. It can't really move. Bishop b8, king b8. King a7 is the threat. How white can defend the bishop? I think they can't, because bishop b6, knight b6. Wow, what a crazy solution. Knight takes d7, bishop b6. And because of the fact the knight is standing there, we just take the bishop. Amazing. Okay, we are really close to the, I believe, to the medium section, but the puzzle number 30, and again the checkmate in one move. It's insane. It's really insane. I don't know what is the level of this puzzle, but I am so surprised that it is not the level of 100. You know, we are really close to the 1700, and this task should be on the level of 100. 165 was the easiest task in the position. Wow. The strongest piece, the queen, it can't give a check, blah. The rooks also can't give a check. The most active piece is bishop. We can take the knight, of course, but this is just a normal exchange. The second most active piece in our camp is the knight. It can give 2 checks. After one of the check, we just get rid of the knight. And after another check, we give a checkmate, because this square and this square are both protected by the knight. 1670. 1670 was the level of the puzzle. Oh, pattern recognition. Guys, we have queen and we have rook. What kind of piece mix we can make by using these pieces? You should probably know from the last episode that this kind of mix we call a battery. right? We call a battery. If we make a battery, we can attack one square with a doubled pressure, or sometimes even with a tripled pressure, if we make a triple battery. For example, by putting rook, and queen on one file, so we can make even a triple pressure on one square. But we can't really join this rook into the attack. So now we probably need to consider somehow this rook. Why am I talking about the battery? Because I'll calculate it really quickly that after queen h7 and queen g7 and queen f8, in every of this, after every of this move, I am losing a queen. So I am looking now for the checks of this rook, but this rook can't give a check, and that's why I found an idea that we may create a battery. How to create a battery? Well, as you probably know, the battery, it's the pressure making along the file. So if we play rook h4, we make a pressure on the h7 pawn, right? And after attacking it twice, now we have to look if black can defend this pawn. Well, they can't. They just can't. The rook can't go there to defend it. The queen also can't jump there. The rook also can't jump there. So after rook h4, we are just getting a pawn. But okay, you can ask me. Okay, you grabbed the pawn. Congratulations. But what's next? What's next? Well, the thing is that the pawn is next to the king, so black is losing a really important defender. If we play rook h4, we grab a pawn on h7. We can maybe give some checks. Right, to take the rook on h8. Maybe then to try to, I don't know, give a check to f6, then play rook h7 and trying to grab another pawn. We can now take all of the black's king defenders. So we will make this king naked, and if the opponent king is naked, we are really fine. So we just play rook h4, making a battery. Queen e5, okay, he took a pawn, so let's just maybe take the pawn on h7. And as I mentioned to you later, you saw this motive. You saw this motive on the probably the second puzzle of the of today's episode. The rook and king are standing on one file. It is in general not a good idea to put the pieces like this. It's really good to have something between them, because if they are the only pieces which are standing on one file, if we give a check along this file, the rook is gone. The same thing happens if the queen stays there. If we give a check along this file, the queen is gone. Yeah, it is good to have something between over there, but they don't have such thing. So we can consider queen h8 check, queen takes h8, rook takes h8, king goes anywhere, and we grab a free rook. And after the end of the variation, we are rook up. So we are really happy that we achieved such a material advantage. Queen h8, rook takes h8, we grab a rook. Okay. Again, the most active piece, checks. Considering checks. Boo, 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 boo. The second strongest piece is the rook. Boo, boo. We didn't even made a threat, and we are both giving up the rook. The knight. The knight can give a check both ways. And both ways looks really good. After knight h4 check, there is rook h4, and after knight f4, the king goes somewhere. So in both cases, we make a use of our knight, but only one makes a perfect sense, because after knight h4, you need to realize that after rook h4, maybe you can get the material. Of course, it is worth to mention that the pawn is pinned. But after knight h4, rook h4, queen h4, you may think that you are happy because you won the material, but you lost one of your attacker. You can't lose your attackers if you don't really need to. After knight f4, you give a check, but the knight can't be taken because, as we mentioned, the pawn is pinned. So after knight f4, we have another piece which takes part into the attack. After knight f4, the king can go to the three ways. And then let's consider them all. After king h2, we can give a check with the queen. And after king g1, queen g2. and we see the potential of our knight, which covers the g2 square. We are perfectly fine. But what happens if the king goes to g1? Well, the rooks are looking at each other. But if something stays between them, the rook loses the communication. So the same thing happens there. If the king stays, it doesn't matter g1 or f1. We don't care. It stays between the rooks. So we can just grab a free. We can just grab a free rook because it is no longer protected. So let's play knight f4 check and be happy. Sorry, I need to charge my laptop. Okay, I come back. We are ready. Puzzle number 33. Puzzle number 33. And mate in 1. What the heck? Oh, calculation. Pure calculation. The pawn endgames. The endgames which a lot of people, including myself, really hate. We hate pawn endgames because it's all about the pure calculation. We can't assess the pawn endgame as a little bit better, unclear pawn endgame. We can't say that the endgame is, I don't know, one side has a compensation. No, these are how to say that? They are really uncompromisable. Maybe I created a new word, but anyway, I want to say that there are only 3 potential results. The pawn endgame can be won, the pawn endgame can be lost, and the pawn endgame can be draw. We can't have an equal pawn endgame. We can have a draw endgame. This is quite a difference. And mentioning that, it only means that we need to calculate every single variation to be sure what result we are fighting about. Yes, what result we are fighting for. Maybe it would be better to say. So, in general, we see that one side has free pawn, and we also have a free pawn. So in general, we call such situation as a pawn races. When one pawn goes forward, the another pawn goes forward, and who is first, it becomes queen first. In general, the side who becomes queen first is most probably about to win the game. After g5, we can calculate a3. If we move forward, the pawn moves forward. If the pawn moves forward, it promotes to the queen with a check. If we promote it in the same time, it would be a draw. But the king unfortunately stays on d4. So we can't really allow black to push this pawn that far away. So maybe we can, I don't know, go for the king. Go with the king. If the pawn moves, we go with the king. We stop the pawn, so we are fine. But if the king goes for our pawn, now the black king starts going for our pawn. And now you can see king c3, king c6, g5, king d6, g6, king e6, g7, king f7, g8, queen, king takes g8. Sorry, we lost our pawn. There is a rule of a pawn square, which means that if pawn moves, we can write a square. Yeah, it is a square, 4 by 4. And if the opponent's king can reach the square, the king is ready for taking the pawn. If the king can't reach the square, the pawn will queen, and the opponent's king wouldn't stop him. So after king c3, king c5, if we write the square of our pawn, we see that the king is standing over there. So the king is in the square. We can even calculate it by writing another squares. g5, king d6. We see the king is still in the square because it's standing over there. g6, king e7. Now the square becomes a little bit smaller, but the king is anyway there. And after g7, king f7, we can see that the king is still in the square. So unfortunately, unfortunately we can't really push that pawn in that way. But if we start with playing g5, and now we can push the pawn on a3, and we see that the square of this pawn looks like that, and the square of our pawn looks like that, right? But now if we reach the square of this pawn, or this pawn, because it is staying on a3, we are on time to get this pawn, and this king is not ready and is not on time to take this pawn. This is amazing. This is pure math. This is pure maths, guys. We play g5, a3, and now we want to reach this square, because as I mentioned, if we push the pawn, it pushes. If we push the pawn, it also pushes. We get a check, we lose a game. So we reach the square. Let's have a look. This is only possible way to reach the square. Yeah, we can't go like this because we are out of the square. King c3, king b2. A trap. If we get a pawn, the king goes further, and king is already in the square of the pawn. So we play g6. Again, the square is like this. If we take the pawn, the king is in the square. So we push. And after a1 queen, we just need to take it. And we are perfectly fine. If we reach 2000, I think I will end this video and we will jump into the medium section. So let's maybe do that in this way. Okay, and this is the exercise I need to think a little bit about. Yeah, so maybe maybe we already reached. Maybe you already reached the medium section. Yeah, so we are going to stop over there. We did 15 puzzles, which is still a pretty good number, but we are still fighting. We are still fighting. So we already ended an easy section. We are starting a medium one in the next episode. So guys, thank you very much for being here. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something new. I think there were quite a lot of new things that you could learn, but the majority of things you already knew before or after watching the first episode, since we saw a lot of checkmates in one. We used this rule by using the strongest and the most active piece a lot. Now it is going to be a little bit harder, but anyway we can make it. But it will happen in the next video. Guys, thank you very much for being here, and see you in the complete guide to a medium chess puzzles. Bye bye.